Alright, what up guys? It's me, and welcome back to another episode of Squid Game in Unity. For those who are unfamiliar with this is a series where I take the games from the hit TV show Squid Game, and I make them in Unity, because I'm bored and I find this fun. For those who don't know what Squid Game is a series made by Netflix in 2021, where contestants compete in a series of games for big grand prize money. This game is called Dalgona. This is a pretty famous one. But essentially, the options that you have are circle, star, triangle, and umbrella. Players must remove the shape from their cookie, leaving a perfect cookie cutter hole in the center without breaking or cracking it in any way. And the time limit for Dalgona is 10 minutes. I have a couple thoughts on how I'm going to do this, but the first thing I'm going to do in this video is create a rough draft of the game, which is essentially just the functionality is there. It just may not look the best or be super smooth to play, but the functionality is there, and that's what I'm going for. So, without further ado, we're going to head over to Unity, where here I've got a scene set up for Dalgona, and I'm gonna create a rough draft of the game, and I'll see you guys once that exists. Alright guys, so as you can probably tell, it's been a little bit of time. I'm really bad at just sitting down and taking several hours to do one of these episodes. I've been splitting it up into chunks whenever I get around to it. So apologies for the delay in getting these videos out. It just kind of happens. But I now have a rough draft of the Dalgona game. So we're going to head into Unity. I'm going to show you how the rough draft works, and then I'm going to break down the 3 main scripts that I used. So, if we go over to Unity, and I play the game, as you can see, we have a UI that comes up here. You can choose between circle, triangle, star, and umbrella. For the sake of this, I'm going to choose circle. And as you can see, we have the cookie that comes up here. So you have the cookie back here, and then you have the shape or the outline. So whenever you click, you can see where you've clicked, and the goal is just to get around the shape without hitting the cookie at all. That basically mirrors what the game is like in the show. And yeah, right now I don't really have any win logic, I just have a you lose object. I might have it in the final draft so that when you click on, you know, one of the beams or one of the things, one of the white dots, you have it pop up like a you win because you've put so many that we already clicked on it. And it'll essentially do the same thing as the you lose button, but if I say click on the cookie, oh no, I broke the cookie and I get prompted to try again, I get thrown back to this screen. So that is how that works. So I'm going to go into VS Code, I'll make it slightly bigger, and explain to you exactly how this works. So this is the UI manager. This one's going to be pretty simple to explain. Essentially, we have the game objects for the panel to choose. We have our circle object, triangle object, star object, and umbrella object, and then we also have our lose panel as well. In the final script, there might be there might be an object in there called win screen. I'll have to figure out how I want to do that, or if I want to do that. Because there's no saying you have to win. Again, this is just to sort of create the concepts. This isn't being published, and it's really more I found it cool to be able to build these things and think about the logic that goes into these games, more so than necessarily having a win-loss, making it playable for the average consumer. In our start function, we're basically just setting the panel where you choose what shape you want to be true, and then we're setting instance to equal this. Without going into too much detail, setting this to instance basically lets us, or creating the instance variable essentially lets us assign. So the UI manager is attached to a game object, which means it exists in the scene. The instance basically assigns it to this instance of the script. So everything is operating through this, and what the instance allows us to do is access this script from other scripts, and you'll see that later on in the explanation. We then just have circle button, which sets the circle object to true, and then the choose panel to false. And we have the same thing for triangle, star, umbrella, and those are the other 3 shapes. So yeah, we have the same thing for that. And then here we have the try again button, where we have the choose panel being set to true, lose screen setting to false, and all of the other objects to false. Then we go into game manager, and we go into the instance of the game manager. So like I said, the instance just allows us to access the script through other scripts. And we set game over to false. Those of you who know good coding practices know that it's not the best thing to have a public variable that you set defaults. You ideally want to have private variables and getter and setter methods. That was a little bit more typing than I felt like doing, so in this case, I just did it as a public variable. It works in the same way. It's just not quite as good of a programming practice, but for what I need, it works for what I need. Then this part down here is quite literally just going through and getting an array of all of the game objects that are in our scene. And then we iterate through that array and say, if the object.name contains beam, then we destroy the object. And that resets the little white cubes because they're called beams. They're essentially just cubes, but I called it a beam because that's technically what it is. So that function overall and this code overall in the script, if we're talking about time complexities, if you guys have gotten to that in your coding classes or if you're teaching yourself, if you've gotten to that, the time complexity here would be linear. So going over to our second of 3 scripts, we have the click beam placer. Really creative name, I know. This one I did need some help from the internet for because raycasting is not my strong suit, but I'm learning as I go along, and learning about this stuff will make the games that I create after this much, much better. So we're checking to see if the mouse button down was clicked, and then this is just some logic to make it so that we don't have a bunch of duplicate clicks. Then we're creating a ray, and we're saying that ray is equal to the camera and screen point to ray from the mouse position. From there, we say raycast hit, and we have an array of those, is equal to raycast all, and we're inputting the ray there. So essentially what that's doing, and I think I still have it in the debug here, I don't think I got rid of the ray, is you see this red line here, that is a raycast, and we're essentially creating that. So then I just have the debug function here. You don't see it when you're actually playing the game, it's just in the editor so that I can see where the ray is hitting, because I did have issues where I wasn't getting the shape, I was just getting the cookie every time, and that's why I have the raycast hit array called hits, is that gets all of the hits, and it was giving me the last object that was hit and I want the first. So that's why we go down here and we say if there is a hit, then the tag is equal to hit.collider.gameObject.tag. So we're just getting the tag from that game object. For those unfamiliar with Unity, tags are basically so that you can tag an object as something. It's really helpful in like colliders. If I was making a tycoon, I could have my objects that are going down the conveyor belt have a tag of object, and then whenever they hit the collider to get collected, I could filter the collisions by the ones that collide with an object with the tag of ball. And then down here, we're saying that if the first hit is the hit of an object with the tag cookie, which is only the cookie background object in the scene, then we're setting game over to true. And then here is, let me see if I format the document, it might, it's not going to make it easier for me. So this line of code is a really, really messy, long line of code. We're basically saying that we're creating a game object called beam, where if we have a beam prefab, we just instantiate the beam object at hit that point and 0 rotation all around. But if we don't, and that's where this colon separates it, then we create a primitive object of type cylinder, and down here we're basically just setting the position of the cylinder and we're setting the scale of the cylinder. But luckily I came up with my own beam and it works just fine. So going over to the third and final script, and this one's going to be really easy to run through. It is our game manager. So we have a boolean called game over. We have the instance, and then on start we set instance to this and make sure game over is false because you don't want to lose right off the bat. And then for updates, we're saying that if game over is equal to true, then we're setting the lose screen to be active. And that's how the Dalgona game works. So for those who have not watched this series, my next step is going to be going through and creating sort of like a final, more polished draft. I'll probably update the position on some of the UIs. I might add in win logic. I'm still not sure about that one yet. But this was a whole lot more simple than I thought it was going to be to create. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I thought this one was going to be really hard. And to be fair, if I was putting it out on a published platform, it would be much more difficult. Because instead of just having a you lose, I'd have to have a you win logic. And I would also have to add in some animations of like the cookie splitting in half when you tap it. And I could do that, but for the amount of time that this series is taking me, for point of reference, this rough draft took me about 3 hours over the span of about 2 weeks. It is not worth it to me to put in those final touches. There is very much a difference from my point of view as a creator of being realistic in what I need to make for a concept, which is what this is, and an actual game that I'm publishing. The actual game that I'm publishing would look much nicer because no one is going to actually want to play what I have, and even in the final draft version, no one's going to want to play what I've got. It would take about another half hour of work to add in the cookie splitting thing. Actually, it might take more because I'd have to create like custom models in Blender. It's something that if I was publishing this game, I would actually do. But this is a concept. This is for the fun of learning a little bit about Unity and Blender, because as you guys saw in the rough draft, I created those shapes in Blender. This is about learning. This is about having fun. I'm not being lazy in not making the whole animation thing. I'm just being realistic of the amount of time it's going to take is more than the amount of value I'm going to get out of it. So yeah. So, the next thing for me to do... Whoops, wrong button. The next thing for me to do is to create a final draft that looks prettier than this. So, I am going to do that, and I will see you guys when I have a final draft. Alright, what's up guys? We now have a final version of Dalgona. There wasn't really all that much that got changed, if I'm being honest. This one was pretty self-explanatory and doesn't really need that much, like, touching up. So, I fixed the menu. It's a little easier to see what the options are. I guess I could have put, like, the little, the shapes on there as well. But, again, it works just like before, where you're tracing it. Oh no! You hit the cookie, you broke the cookie, you try again, and it brings you here. The only other thing I really added was the background scenery from the show. And again, just to reiterate what I said when I ran through the rough draft, this could be a lot better. However, for what making it that much better gets me, it is not worth the time to me. This summer I'm working a 9-to-5 job, which is why it's taking me so long to make these videos, is because I have to make these once I come home from work. And also balance like spending time with my family and just relaxing as well. Because I'm not a morning person, so having to be in the office by 9 is not easy on my sleep schedule. That being said, yes, I know there's a couple things I could do to like make this better, where I can make like a little animation. If I was publishing this, I absolutely would do that. And as a game developer, I want it to be the best user experience. Right now it is not. However, this is less about the user experience, this is not being published, and more about thinking about these games from a logic perspective and the rules and what needs to go into them. So that's why I did this the way I did this. It was a creative choice. There will be a couple more of those in the Squid Game and Unity series. That being said, just to recap, we have created a fully functioning Dalgona game in Unity. There was some Blender modeling involved, as well as a lot of coding involved. And I ran you guys through that in the last little portion. So guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe, do all those things, and I will see you guys in the next video.